Awesome. So let's open our first official Mondays without Steve. Yay! So welcome everyone. Most of you know me. I'm the one they call Brent Michael Phillips, and I'm here to step in because I heard a lot of positive things about the Mondays with Steve, but Steve is busy. So I'm going to talk just for a couple minutes about what we're going to do here, and then we're going to get into it. So big picture, we're going to try to keep the theme and the feel the same. We're going to get together once every week or two to have a discussion on a cool spiritual topic, something around spirituality, energy healing, consciousness, meditation, alternative physics, stuff like that. With the goal being whoever's leading will have a little discussion. We'll have some prepared notes on the topic. And after that, we'll have an open discussion and we'll see where it goes. Lots of ways this could go. We'll see what happens. My goal for being here is a couple fold. One, it seems like a lot of people like the Mondays with Steve group, so we want to keep that rolling. I'd like to, I want to put myself out there to be a little more engaged with the community, to get a little more, time with you guys, seeing your faces, discussions. And number three is I need more content for my YouTube channel, because I am busting my butt creating videos, spending a lot of time and a lot of money, and it's just not getting much traction. And at some point, I'd like to at least make $1 back from YouTube. So I'm hopeful that creating more content, getting more people going to the channel will help there. In terms of logistical stuff, the only real change from Steve's is I'm using email list management software now. So if you guys want to get invited, you just got to sign up for the group. And I sent out an invitation to my whole list last week, as well as a separate invitation to people that were on Steve's list before. So if you have not already gotten onto the list, I would say do so. It's pretty easy. Just go to my website, get on the big list, and you'll see an invite now and then. Pretty easy. I'm not planning on running every session myself. My goal is I will commit to running at least one session a month, maybe two. And I'm going to have guest lecturers, leaders, teachers, experts of various sorts come in. So we already have a couple people lined up for later this month and into May. So if any of you would like to lead a session, let me know. I'd be happy to let you take over, as long as as long as your presentation is on a topic that I think is more or less of interest to the group. Fair enough, fair enough. And in terms of the recordings, they will all be posted on my YouTube channel. Most likely, I will also post the links in the VIP club for people that want to get to the archive. So anybody in the VIP club, that will be available at no extra charge for all levels in the VIP club. And I suppose the last thing, which we can talk a little more about at the end, is the reason that this has stayed at 1 o'clock on Monday was that was a good time for Steve. I'm not sure that's the best time for the group. And I would actually prefer to move it away from Monday afternoon, only because I have events pretty much every Monday year round with the VIP club, either a wealth club or a practice group or a movement session of some kind. So I'm not thrilled about doing two live events the same day. It's not a huge deal, but I would prefer to move it away from Monday just for that reason. I'm thinking maybe Thursday, maybe Sunday. We'll see. So we'll take a poll. I'll probably put together a survey for the list. I'll talk to you guys at the end about that. Possibility of integrating movement, quantum field, maybe some music. I don't know. We'll see where it goes. And I just want to say that the reason I think these groups are valuable is the interactive part. That if you guys just want to lecture on a topic, there's literally a million places you can go for that, right? So I'm hoping everyone will want to be engaged. And I would like to see the discussion and interaction fill half of the session or more. Because again, if you just want to lecture on a random topic, we have a million services for that, right? The reason we're doing this as a live group is specifically to interact. And, every lecture will be a little different. I'm not planning on preparing like hour-long lectures. I'm thinking like 20 to 30 minutes. Just to stimulate discussion, conversation, and get things going. And then we'll see where it goes. My goal is to commit roughly an hour for each session. But, I'm going to try not to get scheduled back to back. So if it runs a little over, that's fine. But that's the goal. Try to keep it to about an hour. Short, sweet, impactful. Any questions about this stuff before, because I know this is our first session without Steve. So any questions or shares, go for it. Otherwise, we'll launch into our topic for today, which is on soul personalities. I think, fascinating theory I've come up with the last few years that I think would make a great book in the future that I want to share with you guys, get some feedback, because I think it's really cool. So any questions about the logistics, the new email list? As far as I know, Steve is okay. He's just busy. I suppose there's a chance that Steve is actually here, in which case it technically wouldn't be Mondays without Steve. Well, I suppose it could be. It would just be Mondays without some other Steve, right? So Steve Rizzo, if you're there, you're always welcome. We'll just change it to Mondays without some other Steve if you're actually here. And the reason we're calling it Mondays without Steve is simple. It's funny, people. Do we need a better reason, right? And I looked at variations, time without Steve, Monday, they just didn't flow off the tongue as well. Mondays without Steve seem to really work, you know? And I'm hoping someday this will turn into some big group where there's like 1,000 people that show up and everyone's going to be like, why the hell do they call it Mondays without Steve? And you'll all laugh because you'll be in the know, right? You'll be the old timers. You'll be like, yeah, I remember when Steve ran it way back in 2022. Yeah, back in my day. And Brent took it over. Yeah, it seems like yesterday. Yeah, that'll be us. And anyone seen a little black cat head and tail flitting around here? Just so you guys know, it was what, 3 weeks ago in the latest level 2, the Master Healer Intensive, Edwin discovered the mouse cursor. So now he's on a mission to destroy every mouse cursor on my computer. He goes nuts attacking the mouse cursors. He's sitting here right now in hunter pose, watching, waiting for it to come out. So that's Edwin, and he is on a mission to save the family from the evil mouse cursor. Yep. It is a mouse. Cats are meant to chase them, right? So no questions. All right, I'll share a little bit. One of the things they taught me at MIT was when people have no questions, either everybody understood everything or nobody understood anything, because you only get questions in the middle. So raise your hand if you understood everything. It's okay. I think that was pretty easy, right? Mailing list, new time, right? Discussion, right? Raise your hand if you understood nothing about anything. Anybody? All right. If so, you're in the right place. Yeah. Awesome. So let's get to it. So welcome to our first official Mondays without Steve. And what I wanted to focus on today was my theory of soul personalities. And so this idea of soul personalities came to me sometime last year when I was looking at my life, and in particular, health and money, to a lesser extent, love too. And what I realized was there's something off. That if life really worked the way we expect it to, in our modern 21st century, sort of what we would call Western industrialized culture, which of course is not just in the West, right? It's everywhere. But from that perspective, what we're taught and what we accept as deeply true, almost without questioning, is that more or less we're a bunch of random separate beings that ended up on Earth as a result of some long-term cosmological, biological, chemical accident. So here we are, and there's what, 8 billion humans sitting on this Earth, all trying to figure out the best action to take so they can get a bigger share of the scarce resources we all compete for. That's kind of our paradigm, isn't it? And most people assume that at such a deep level, they never even question it. Of course, it's this way. It makes sense. That's what it looks like. And everyone knows that, right? I'll just warn you guys, whenever someone says, well, everyone knows that, that's a red flag. When someone, that's not evidence, right? That does not build a case to proof. What it means is you haven't thought this through. And there's some deep and fundamental assumptions that may actually be false. And so when we look at life from the perspective of, well, we're a bunch of separate beings trying to figure out the best thing to do to get a bigger share of these scarce resources, money being the obvious one, plus pieces of that, right? The home in the neighborhood you like, the car you like, the clothes you like, good food, massages, basketball tickets, the opera, whatever your thing is, right? And we think that if we can just do the right things, then we'll have a good life. We will get more of those scarce resources, attractive partners, good jobs, desirable homes, etc., right? And we see this in our culture all the time, that Madison Avenue, the advertising industry, figured this out a long time ago. That if you show people that you make them think that they need your product to be something, it works. If we look at beer commercials, is a great example. What's really interesting is very few beer commercials are about beer. How many beer commercials compete on the specific kind of hops they use, or the brewing process, or some technical aspect of it that actually changes how the beer tastes in some way? Generally not. You'll see it a little bit, but you watch a beer commercial, what do you see? You see a bunch of really attractive young people all having a great time at a bar holding beers. What's really interesting is you never see them drinking the beer because that's illegal, at least in America. You cannot be drinking the beer and alcohol in an advertisement. So they show a bunch of really attractive young people all smiling and having a great time holding their beer at the bar, right? Now, anyone actually been to a bar in your life? Raise your hand if you've ever actually been to a real bar. Good, awesome. For those of you that aren't raising your hand, I would go, you got to get out more, people, right? You got to get out more. If you've never been to a bar, seriously, it's like saying you've never seen a movie, right? Try it. If you hate it, don't ever do it again, right? I went skydiving exactly once. I'm glad I did, just not planning on doing it again, right? And so if you go out to a bar, it's not like that. But we've been convinced through this repetition of beer commercials, part of us has this expectation, hey, if I go to this bar and order this beer, I'm going to be an attractive young person with all these friends and I'll be smiling and happy, right? Yeah, of course it doesn't work that way. But we've built this idea into our minds. And that kind of thing has happened with the whole world. And so we tend to think we get lost in this victor paradigm, thinking that life is just about being a victor, being smarter, being stronger, getting up a little earlier, staying at the office a little later, being a little more effective, a little more efficient. Now, there's nothing bad about any of that. It's just what I want you to hear is that there's more to life than just that. There's more to life than just that. Why is that? That as part of my sort of thought experiment, when I came up with this idea, I looked at my life and I said, you know what? It's very odd that I've done so many things right, so well in many ways, and had such crap results. And it didn't make a lot of sense. And as an example of one that a lot of us are familiar with, anybody ever seen an investment newsletter, or more specifically an advertisement for them? You know, raise your hand. Cool. Most of us past a certain age get interested in money and investing, right? I had almost no interest in it in my 20s. By the time I'm in my mid 40s, I'm like starting to go to these seminars and there's a bunch of middle-aged guys trying to get more money, right? And so you look at these investment newsletters, they all have a similar format. They'll show you some graph of some amazing results that people got using their system, right? And they'll be like, you know, if you sign up for our secret system, you know, we'll give you the exact step-by-step process that Bill here used to turn $5 into 800 million in 3 days, right? And they'll, you know, show the graph and, you know, our system, had you compared our system versus the S&P from like, you know, 3:22 a.m. on December 13th last year until like, you know, 4:22 p.m. on July this year, then, you know, we would have returned 840% versus the S&P, which dropped 20, right? So you get all these amazing claims. We beat the market. We did 3 times better than the S&P. We did, right? All the hedge funds. And what is it they're making you think? It's all designed to make you think, hey, if I just had their system, I would get these amazing returns too, right? Hey, I want to be like Bill. I got $5 in my pocket. I want to have $800 billion by Friday, right? So you go and buy their newsletter, which, anywhere from $99 to maybe 5,000. I remember during the crypto boom last year, I was looking at a couple. They were like $4, $5, $8,000 for a damn newsletter, right? And why would you pay $8,000 for basically all you're getting is adding yourself as a carbon copy to a mass email? That is literally what you're getting, right? That's the only action that occurs. And you get their systems or their trades or mirror their star, whatever it is, right? Well, what I want you guys to see is there's this assumption inside that if I go take the same action that you did, I will get the same result. Does everyone see that? That's the big picture here. A lot of words to say a very simple thing. We watch the beer commercials and think, oh, if I drink this beer and go to a bar, girls will like me and I'll be young and attractive and I'll be happy all the time. Of course, right? Investment newsletter. Oh, if you buy our newsletter and get our secret system, you're going to make, $1 billion by Friday. You're going to do 3 times better than the S&P, all that. And what I want you guys to see is that's not true. It's a lie. It's simply not true. We'll look at the investment newsletter. How do we know it's not true? Well, in case you guys didn't know, they cherry pick their statistics. They basically have a computer simulating their trades against the S&P 500 and running billions of combinations of every start and stop point and measurement you can imagine to find the perfect interval that shows the biggest improvement, right? They may find that their system did triple better than the S&P, but only for these 3 weeks in October of 2009, right? But that's it. But that's what you see in the newsletter. And there's this little tiny fine print disclaiming it all, right? It's such nonsense that if you read the fine print, it basically says everything here is nonsense and bullshit. You should really ignore it. We're just trying to trick you to take your money, right? It's almost what it says. At least when you translate lawyer into English, that's the English translation. All this is bullshit. None of this means a damn thing. If you buy our newsletter, good luck to you, buddy, right? Because you just paid us $100 to get carbon copied on an email. Why is that? Well, it's not that their system is bad or wrong. I'm going to see sometimes if I turn the camera on and off, it'll fix this. All right, a little better. It's not that their system is bad. A lot of the time, it may actually be a good system. It's just that the system you use to pick the stocks based on the RSI or, the profit loss, I got all these different crazy indicators, right? And there's nothing bad about some of that. Some of them are good systems. It's just the system you use to pick your stocks is not the most important thing that determines the result. It is not. But that's what we all think, right? It's not. Does anyone want to take a guess? If you buy the investment newsletter, some of them are good, some are bad. Personally, I kind of like the Motley Fool. They seem to be in integrity. Seems to be one of the better ones, right? They're usually less expensive. You're looking at $100, $200. There's others that are just a nightmare, where it's just all hype. And so what's really going on, anyone want to take a guess? Let's say I'll pick on Bill, since we're picking on Bill here. That, hey, Bill, if you go and buy the Motley Fool newsletter and buy their stock picks, what's the number one most important factor that determines what happens? Anybody want to take a guess? Come on, people. That's why I say interactive, right? Yeah, Janos got it, nailed it. It's you. It's that simple. Yeah, Jennifer got it too. Beautiful. The most important thing that determines the result is you. That's the truth. So the system you use is part of it, but the timing and environment is part of it too. You could pick a system that did great in the 90s that doesn't work at all now. And that's how internet marketing is. About every 6 months, what works totally changes. So the timing, the context is part of it. Part of it is your energy. How attached are you? How are your beliefs about money? part of it is also soul contracts and life purpose, and that's kind of where we're going with this. So notice the most important thing is you. So life is not always completely determined by action and process. You can give the same people the exact same investment newsletter, and they will do differently with it. It's crazy how I've worked with some number of day traders over the years. It's one of the more interesting things. I didn't expect when I became a healer, I'd be working with a lot of day traders, but it happened. And I think it's interesting. I worked for an investment bank for a short time after I got my bachelor's degree. So it's interesting to me. And what seems to happen is they go, hey, Brent, I spent all this time and money developing and learning this system. And every time I go from paper trading to live trading, I do terrible. They'll say when I'm paper trading, which just means simulated, no real money moving around, I do awesome. But as soon as real money comes in and I turn it on and do the exact same thing, I do terrible. And the answer is, it's your energy, people, right? It's you. If you had no involvement, then you get the same results live or paper trading, right? It's you. And so what I realized was that the way life really works is almost like we're playing different sports. That some people seem to be playing one game where if they take the right actions and wake up earlier and stay later and work harder and are more clever, they get rewarded. But other people don't. It would be like, imagine that you're a hockey player and you're very familiar with hockey, right? And you show up for a game one day and there's no ice. Instead, there's a big grass field and someone tosses you a soccer ball. And you start playing soccer, but you're not aware of soccer. You don't know how it works. So you play like hockey and you immediately run right at the guy with the ball and nail him, right? Take him off his feet, knock him into the stands. And you're like, hey, I just made a great hockey play. And the referee comes over, boom, red card, you're ejected. And you're like, what? That was a totally clean check. Guy had the ball, totally legal. And the ref goes, well, for one, you're wearing ice skates. That's not really allowed on a soccer game. For two, what you just did is a serious penalty in soccer. Because they're different sports, right? And I don't care if you don't know anything about sports, doesn't matter. Just know they're different games. They have different rules. But imagine if you thought you were playing hockey, but everyone else is playing soccer. It would be a disaster. You'd be terrible. You'd be a liability to your team. You'd probably cause all sorts of fouls and get yourself ejected and maybe even arrested. And the reason is they changed the game on you. And so I didn't know how to reconcile this till I came up with this concept of soul personalities. And this ties it all together. And so how does it work? It's pretty simple, in fact, that we know that our bodies have personalities. Of course they do. We have different kinds of bodies, and they're good at different kinds of things. Maybe you're a really big, strong man. Well, then you're really good at lifting heavy things, right? If you're tall, it's easy to reach the top shelf. Maybe you're a tiny woman, but you're super flexible, like a gymnast. That's a different kind of body personality, isn't it? You'll be really good at squeezing into tight places. You'll be very comfortable in a tiny space over a long period of time. I know in the military, short guys were highly desired for not only submarine service, because subs are tiny, right? If you're a small person, that's an advantage. But also some roles in bombers, like in World War II, the tail gunner and the belly gunner needed to be small. So the point is, our bodies are different. And if you're growing up and you want to be an athlete, you'll tend to pick a sport that matches your body type. So if you're a super flexible young girl, you may go to gymnastics or dance. If you're a really strong guy, maybe you play, or big guy, you play football. If you're really tall, maybe you play basketball. If you're really fast, maybe you run track or play soccer, right? Duh. So our bodies are different. And we don't expect them to all work the same. Of course not. If you go to CrossFit gyms, They generally have one workout for men and one for women. Why? Men and women's bodies are different on average. It's nothing personal, it's just how it works, right? Our minds are also different. They have personalities. We know this, of course, that you can learn what's the kinds of things you're good at and the kinds of things you're bad at. So for example, I was a great software engineer. I was a natural. It was very easy for me to think that way. So it was amazing to me that when I had my first professional coding job as a summer intern in college, after just a few weeks there, I was probably the best coder in the building. It's nothing personal, but this brain was built for it, right? Whereas I would be an absolute disaster at customer service. Oh my God. You put me in a technical support job, I'd almost certainly be fired by my first break. Why? My personality is not suited to that. I probably wouldn't be a great kindergarten teacher. I'm too impatient. Just Brent's personality is not well suited to that. And the governments know this. In the military and most civil service jobs, you have to go through some kind of personality assessment to give them a sense of what you're going to be good at, what you're going to be bad at, right? For the same reason, you don't put the tiny girl as a lineman on the football team, right? You don't take a creative high genius who's full of energy with low social skills and put them in tech support, right? Disaster. And so we know about body personalities and we know about mind personalities. What I realized was, oh my God, souls have personalities too. And it's so obvious when you look for it, right? It's so obvious when you look for it. And I'm surprised. I can't say no one has thought of this because I don't know everyone. I haven't read everything. But I haven't seen anyone with this concept yet. It might be out there. And what it comes down to is just as you have a certain kind of body that is good at some things and bad at others, you also have a certain kind of mind that is good things at some things and bad at others. Your soul is no different. And basically, the soul essentially sets the rules of the game for the life you're playing. That's where I want to tie in the sports metaphor. And so essentially, your soul incentivizes different kinds of behaviors depending on the soul personality you have, in the same way that your body does, right? So if you're a big, strong guy, maybe it's very easy for you to add muscle and strength, right? So you will be encouraged to lift weights and eat a lot of protein. You'll get really big and strong. You'll be a star football player, maybe a power lifter, right? That's cool. You probably wouldn't do as well trying to be a master yogi, right? You could join Bikram yoga if it's still around and join their competitions. You'd probably lose. Nothing personal, just you don't have the body for it, right? Generally, football players struggle with yoga and vice versa, right? Everyone loves to laugh at the big football players struggling to hold a yoga pose, right? I'd love to laugh at a bunch of yogis playing tackle football, right? I think they'd be in worse shape than the football player doing yoga. Anyhow, it doesn't matter, right? So the soul determines the rules of the game you're playing in this life. And they're not the same for everybody. That's a takeaway here. You have a different soul personality than another person. So you may find certain things and ways of being easier, more effective than others. And so this kind of begs the question, okay, Brent, what are the soul personality types? And I thought about this for a long time, over 6 months. And then one day it hit me. I don't know if this is the perfect answer. I'm not sure, right? But I think a great place to start is just the stages of consciousness that most of you are familiar with if you've worked with me or Steve, based on Carol Ruth Knox's system. The victor, the victim, the vehicle. And so those of you that have gone through my 30 Days to Awakening program, which you should all get and go through, by the way, I think it's life-changing. I think it's some of my best work. I'm supposed to be like a parent and not have favorites, but I have favorites. Not all my work is created equal, right? Any of you that have more than one kid or more than one animal, right? Of course you say to them you don't have favorites, but it's kind of hard to not have favorites, isn't it? Yeah. I only have one child, so that made it easy on me, one human child, but I've had a lot of cats. And I have to say, no, I don't love my cats equally. It's not a conscious choice. It's just what happens, right? So it's the same thing with the stages of consciousness. We're not better or worse, but very quickly, the victor is the lowest stage. That's when you're dominated by thinking things outside of you have the power. And you end up with victor behaviors. I also tie this in we go through this in some detail in the level 1 intensive, the secrets for higher dimensional living. So you guys can really learn this, get it down pat. This is just a quick overview. So the 0 to 200 on the Hawkins scale, that's the victim. Anger, frustration, despair, greed, fear, anxiety, shame, all the bad emotions, right? Then 200 to 500, we enter the victor stage. That's our modern Western industrialized culture. We're a bunch of separate beings trying to take the best action to get more scarce resources, more money, more attractive partners, more good real estate, good job, good car, good Lakers tickets, whatever your thing is, right? And the third stage is the vehicle, where we surrender. And this seemed like a good start. I thought, wow, this is a great idea. So we have our 3 personality types. But then when I tried to fit real world data to this model, it didn't work very well. In particular, it wasn't a direct hit for me. Because of all the humans on the earth, there's one that Brent knows better than others. That's the man in the mirror, right? Nothing personal. That's true of every single one of us here, right? You know yourself better than any other person because you've been there the whole time, haven't you? That's right. You probably know your wife, your husband, maybe your kids, best friends really well. But even then, much less exposure to them than to yourself. And I realized it doesn't quite fit. And it took me another while, about another 6 months. And then it hit me one day. I'll ask the group. Other than the stages of consciousness, victim, victor, vehicle, there's 2 soul personality types that are missing. And that completes it when we find them. What are the other 2? So we got victim, we got victor, we got vehicle. That's 3 of the 5. We need 2 more to complete. Someone take a guess. What are the other 2?
Old and new.
Old and new, I like it. So old soul, new soul. I love it. Not what I'm looking for, but it's a good answer. And just remember, I don't know exactly what the personality types are. I'm trying to reverse engineer this using a combination of data, analysis, and intuition. It's as much as it would be nice if an angel came down and handed me a book printed on gold with all the secrets, and it's all clear and obvious, right? I'm poking fun at a modern religion here. And yes, it really came from God, and yes, it really was an angel, and yes, it was in gold, but no, you can't see it, and no, we didn't take a picture of it, and no, it went back to heaven, so you can't look at it now, right? Yeah, it wasn't that. Okay, I see some great answers.
How about a soul who has only been on Earth, or a soul who has lived off planet?
You know, I love what you guys are saying, because I'm actually going to save the chat here, because there may be something to every suggestion. Givers, takers, old soul, young soul, inner, outer, healer, helper, teacher, student, healer, destroyer. These are great answers. And all of these may be integrated someday into a more refined soul personality system. But the obvious answer that I'm looking for, it's again obvious once you know what to look for, is the transitions, people. The transition from victim to victor. That's usually at least a whole life in and of itself, if not more than one. The transition from victor to vehicle. Once I saw the transitions as their own categories, it all started to work. And again, I love all your suggestions. Been human, not been human, been on Earth, not been on Earth, off-planet soul, Earth-only soul. These are all great answers. And there could be truth to every one of these. This is a brand new area, right? But seeing the transitions, then it starts to really click. That essentially there's 5 basic soul personality types based on this scale. We got the victim, we got the victim-victor transition, right? Someone that's going through that. We got the victor, Then we have the victor vehicle transition, and then we have the vehicle. I'm going to go out on a limb and say almost everybody here, especially those of you that have done some of my trainings, will be likely in a victor vehicle transition. That's where most of us are. And here's what happened to us. When you become ready to be a vehicle, that's a big deal. We're talking generally, my understanding, at least 200 lifetimes as a victor. So it is a big deal. This is probably the most significant graduation you've ever been through in terms of consciousness, at least on Earth. So hundreds of lifetimes as a victor. And so many of us, including Brent, showed up in this life not realizing the game had changed, that we all got really good at being the victor. Hundreds of lifetimes, right? Could be more, could be thousands, tens of thousands. Every soul path is unique. So when I'm throwing out the numbers, these are just broad strokes, right? It's like asking how many dates do you have to go on to fall in love and get married? I don't know. I'm sure there's an average somewhere. Maybe it's 5 or 10 or 20 or 30. Some people it's hundreds or thousands. Other people go on one date and fall in love and stay married till the day they die, right? So broad strokes, we're talking usually a couple hundred lifetimes. And so you got really good at being the victor. In other words, you spent 100 years playing hockey. You got really good at hockey. And then one day you showed up and the game had changed and no one told you. And so I could say a lot more about the victim, the victor, the victim victor, and that we're going to mostly focus on the victor vehicle transition because I'm getting 80% of us are there. The rest of you guys do 30 days to awakening. That'll probably take care of it on its own. And if you don't like it, what that means is you're not in that lifetime. If you go through 30 days to awakening and think it's irrelevant and stupid, then yeah, that's just not you. It's basically going, hey, is this the game you're seeing, right? Imagine being a hockey player and going, hey, are you a hockey player wondering why there's grass? Why there's no one else is wearing skates? Why you're the only one carrying a stick, right? Why the referee throws you out of the game the first time you hit someone? Guess what? They changed the game and no one told you. That's what most of us are living. And that's the takeaway I want you guys to hear. They changed the game on you and no one told you. Why? Part of it is figuring it out for yourself. When Carl Wolf did his skating diagnostic, it started with you met him specifically at the equipment rental station on the beach. That's where I met him. And the first part of the process was he turned on his camera and videotaped me first renting the skates from the guy. That was part of the process. And then I sat down and with a pile of equipment and Carl videotaped me and said nothing. And I'm like, are you going to help me with this? He's like, no, Brent, this is part of it. Figure it out, right? And then I thought, hey, I'll just look around at other people. But we were there on a Tuesday in November. Not a lot of people at the beach on a Tuesday in November. So there was no one to look at. And it took me at least 10 minutes because I think I had rollerbladed once in my life, like 20 years before in college. I had a blind date. And my buddy had just given me, his rollerblades. And, but back in those days, no one wore protective equipment back in the 90s, right? We liked to go headfirst into walls with no helmet, and we liked it, right? But that was part of it. And I felt really clueless. I was a little annoyed with Carl as I'm sitting there feeling stupid, trying to figure out how to put the pads on. But that's the point. That's what all of you guys is. Me too. We're here going, what the hell is this? How does this work? They changed the game. And so here's what it comes down to. As the victor, when you're in a victor lifetime, your soul rewards you for doing victor behaviors, being a little smarter, working a little harder, getting up a little earlier, right? Building a better mousetrap. If that's you, then taking smarter, better action will deliver results. So if you're in a pure victor life and you get a good newsletter you like, pay attention, buy those stocks, you'll do well. Because that's exactly what your soul wants you to do. Learning, growing, connecting dots. better, faster, stronger. Yes, that's the victor. But as the vehicle, you're not going to be rewarded for pure victor behavior, because that's not why you're here. You're here, quite simply, to do your best you can to live life from the ego in the way you think you want, but surrender the result. That's why you're here. So, long story short, as the victor, more information, working harder, smarter, cleverer will make you more money, will fix your health, will bring you friends, will make you happy. As the vehicle, it won't, not in the same way, because that's not why you're here. You're here not to make things be the way your ego wants, but to learn to relate to them, even when it's not. So you're still required to be the victor, right? Just because you're awakened doesn't mean the landlord won't evict you if you don't pay rent, right? So we must maintain that. Just understand that letting go, shifting your perspective, releasing attachment, being present, grounded in the present, drawing your strength from that rather than a fantasy about the future, that's what your soul wants. And when I realized this, I'm like, oh my God, my life makes so much more sense. Because I had found, if I look at the periods in my career where I was working really hard, sacrifice, long hours, being smart, all that, it's been a freaking nightmare. Starting with my startups in the 90s, I really did work 80, 100 hours a week. And it was a disaster. Not only did I never make money, I destroyed my health. I blew up my relationship with my best friend and gave myself severe complex PTSD as a result. No joke. Really caused huge problems physically, mentally, socially, financially. Why? If I was in a victor life, it would have worked out different. I was doing everything right. There's been other times in my life where I'm just kind of over the whole rat race and I'm just kind of cruising, doing what I have to do every day, spending way too much time watching sports, smoking weed, movies, D&D. And all of a sudden things are clicking and I start making all this money. I'm like, what the hell, man? What I realized was it's simple, soul personality. My soul wants me to let go, wants me to be present. It doesn't want me to bust my ass figuring out this thing to manipulate to make it go the way I want. That's a victor life. And when you start looking at your life that way, I think it'll start to make a lot more sense. Just realize, again, you're playing a different game. So, again, if your friends are still playing hockey and now you're playing soccer, trying to tell them what you do that's working isn't going to help them. It's only going to confuse them, right? You go, hey, to score, it's easy. You kick the ball into the back of the net, right? And they go out on the hockey ice and go, I don't see a ball, I see a puck. And then they go kick it into the net and the referee takes away the goal. And they're like, what the hell, man? Again, wrong game. So there you go. Soul personalities. We have different soul personalities. Understanding yours, that defines the rules of the game. Once you know the rules of the game you're playing, you'll be a lot more powerful. Cool stuff, huh? So let's take questions. Questions, comments, go for it. I see a couple in the chat room, but anyone that wants to share, go ahead.
I have a question.
Yep.
This is something that I feel like it's related
Mhm.
somehow. When I used to fast a lot and I would feel like, okay, when I would fast, I would feel spiritually aware, lightness of being. That's kind of how I connected the source, and as one that would really help.
Mhm.
Now that I had my awakening, I feel that after I eat and lay down and like heavier foods, and I was wondering
Yeah.
if that is related to what you're saying with there's a soul personality with because to me, like, the relationship with food and eating is like it's almost like night and day.
Yeah. It's it is different. What it comes down to in this case is this, that most of us as the victor are still using a lot of fear motivation to keep our diet and nutrition in check. And that works, it's just kind of miserable. So imagine if you freak out, if you gain an ounce of fat. Well, that will probably work to keep you thin, but you're going to be freaked out a lot and miserable, right? And so what happens to a lot of us, this happened to me in my own awakening, was as the awakening started to settle in, I realized, oh, well, if it's all just God's will and we just have to be present, why am I trying so hard to eat well and exercise and take care of myself, right? And so I let it go for a while, and big surprise, I gained weight and didn't feel as good. Why? Well, it's simple. With awakening, a lot of your fears start to dissolve. And if the fear of getting fat or sick or whatever is the primary thing getting you to eat well, then when that fear dissipates, you may go off the path a little bit. The good news is you can learn different motivations so you don't need the fear anymore. And it's, in theory, it's easy. Instead of being afraid of being fat or sick or getting diabetes, see if you can be motivated by the joy of liking how your body feels, the joy of movement, the joy of looking in the mirror and going, hey, that guy, girl, she doesn't look too bad, right? Whatever it is. So that's a very normal thing. It's one of the more challenging aspects of the graduation. Because as the victor, the fear of motivation works. You pay a price for
Yeah,
it, but
I
it
tell
works.
you,
Yeah.
sometimes I'm like, I miss my ego because I liked it kept me going. Now I'm like,
Sure.
meh.
Yep. Absolutely. Other questions? Let's see.
Thank you so much.
Okay, a question. What's the definition of victor transition? It's the process of awakening. Would be, okay, the victor to vehicle transition. And it's transition, not transaction. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
as a victor, you think that it's all about separate beings competing for scarce resources. As the vehicle, you realize we're all on the same team.
Mm-hmm.
We're like the cast of a play.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, I may appear to be the bad guy in the play, but I'm just an actor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. That some in the higher realms might see World War II that way. It was a big play.
Mm-hmm.
Hitler was acting as the bad guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Roosevelt and Churchill were the good guys, right? Now, it's not quite that simple, but ultimately it's a simulation. And the victor to vehicle is a challenge because there's very little support for it in our world. The victim to victor transition is a lot easier in many ways because everyone knows there's victims and everyone knows there's victors, and it's obvious, right?
Yeah.
You spend
But
2 minutes around someone, right?
so the
And
transition is,
go ahead.
so it's more like really being of service of other and thinking of others, knowing we're in it all together. Not
That's
just
part of it.
being-
Yeah, that's absolutely part of it, because part of awakening is realizing that every single experience you have in your life, the same you will also is experiencing from every other person's perspective.
Mhm.
And that's why Jesus taught what he did. He said, I and the Father are one. That which you do unto the least of my brethren, you do unto me.
Mhm.
So if Jesus knows that if he smacked you on the head and took your lunch money, that was inevitably meaning that he was going to get smacked on the head and have his lunch money taken, because we're all one.
Mhm.
And do you see how the victim victor transition is much easier and more visible?
Yeah.
Because you see it, and there's all sorts of resources in our world for it. Self-improvement programs, right? The Marine Corps, the Army,
Mhm.
they take a lot of kids on the wrong path and straighten them out, turning
Mhm.
victims into victors, right? Oprah, Dr. Phil, tough love.
Mhm.
There's a lot out there. But most people don't even know there's a vehicle state. They're not even aware it exists.
Mhm.
And even because there's so few people in that state, right?
That's-
Imagine if you didn't know there were albino people, you wouldn't think about it too much. They're just very rare. There's not many of them.
Gotcha.
So vehicles are probably more rare than that. And it can be tricky because, again, there's very little support or understanding in our culture for this. That you're playing a game that most people don't even know exists.
Mhm.
How do you handle that? Okay.
Cool. Thank
Other
you.
questions? Okay. If I'm starting an online business, does it mean I should come from a place of what comes to me is the way it's supposed to be? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Sharon, this is the challenge of being a vehicle. There's almost no support for it in our culture. That's why the rules of the vehicle tell you to do things that seem completely against all the rest of the rules, right? Again, it's not a perfect metaphor. You're playing hockey, now it's soccer, right? If you're playing soccer, go kick it into the goal. You're like, what? That's against the rules. Why? In hockey, it is literally against the rules. There is a rule in the hockey rule book that says you cannot kick the puck into the net. So yes, a lot of the things you learn go directly against what you lived before because you're playing a new game. At the same time, remember, in the trainings and programs, there's a lot more detail on how to do this, but especially the advanced trainings, the platinum, the level 2, 3, 4, is about how do we still be a victor? Because you still got to go to work and make money and pay the bills and all that, right? While moving into the vehicle state, it's not obvious. But when you learn to do it, it's amazing. It's a little tricky to balance. It's roughly like anybody that's been into bodybuilding, which I was, a couple times in my life. Every bodybuilder knows it's relatively easy to either focus on gaining muscle or burning fat. Right? If you want to gain muscle, you lift heavier weights, you work out more, you eat more, done, right? But when you do that, you'll also gain fat. It's also relatively easy if you have the willpower to burn fat. You eat less, restrict your carbs, maybe cycle them, and work out more. So those are easy. But the trouble is when you're losing fat, you're also losing muscle. The trick is, can you do both at the same time? Is there a way to eat and work out so that you're adding lean muscle and burning fat? Yes, there is, but it's a narrow window to hit. It's real challenging. And it's different for every person. You have to be weighing your meals, timing them, workouts, calorie cycling. It can be done, but it's tough to do both. And that's kind of the victor in the vehicle. You can do both. You can be a great victor and be a vehicle, but it's like adding muscle and burning fat. You can do it, but it's tricky. There's a narrow window where you have to hit. So I hope that helps. Okay, how do you devote yourself to personal evolution while you're starving? I would say number one, stop using that as an excuse. Because, and I don't mean that in a harsh way, because I hid behind that excuse forever. Oh, my life is such a wreck, right? I would, for a couple of years, after I did my first 9 sessions with Terry in the first training, I really thought I'd never be able to afford any personal development ever again. That's really what I thought. And I spent several years hiding behind that. Oh, I can only go if it's free. Oh, it costs too much. What I realized was, of course, there are things you can't do without money. I'd love to have a one-on-one with Tony Robbins. And if one of you guys can set that up, that's amazing. Last I heard, to get anything close to that with Tony, we're looking at least a $1 million investment. That one of my buddies did it years ago. He paid Tony Robbins essentially $1 million for what was, I think, 3 meetings with him and 20 other people. So it wasn't even a one-on-one. It was a group of 20. $1 million, right? I haven't done that because, for better or for worse, Brent doesn't have $1 million to burn. So could I cobble it together, taking on lots of risk and obligation? Sure, but not going to. So I just got to say, hey, one-on-ones with Tony, small groups with Tony, off the table for Brent. That's okay. There's lots of other personal development that's not a one-on-one with Tony Robbins, right? So I would say, let it be a simple technical problem. If there's this thing you want to do, retreat with this teacher, program here, supplements there. There will be certain things that are just not a realistic option because it's out of your budget. If you're making 18 grand a year and there's a $40,000 retreat, that's not going to happen. Just like I'm not going to be going to see Tony one-on-one anytime soon. That's okay. Just don't hide behind it and do the things you can. And you got to find something to pick and focus on to stretch. Just pick just one at a time, right? That maybe you love Tony Robbins and you love Carl Wolf and you love Lisa Nichols. You can't go all in stretching on 3 people's programs at once. No, pick one to stretch, right? When I did Carl Wolf's intensive life training, the $15,000 tuition was a huge stretch for me. It took me, 1.5 years to save up the money? And it was scary. That was a huge commitment. I needed a new car. There was all sorts of things I needed. But I took a huge risk on Carl and it paid off. So find something that's really right for you, stretch there, nowhere else. And, don't do anything that's going to destroy you. If you're going to starve or your kids are going to skip meditation, don't do it. Medication, right? I can't imagine a situation where you spending money would force your kids to skip meditation, which is what it came out as. I don't know. I thought that was funny. My brain sometimes and tongue have a different idea of the words we're about to say, right? Yeah. So I hope that helps, James. I'm sorry, David James. So you can absolutely devote yourself to personal evolution when you're starving. Part of it is I got to make some damn money, right? Get a job, right? Build a skill, do something. I'm not criticizing David here. Most of us have legitimate reasons why we're stuck in a bad place. I did, right? I had millions of dollars stolen from me twice, body destroyed, chronic pain, PTSD, autism, chemical poisoning, Lyme disease. I'll talk your ear off about all that, right? Those were all legit things. One thing my work comp lawyer told me was, he goes, Brent, in some ways, you are the most amazing thing I've ever seen. Because he said, I have never seen someone with anything close to your level of disability and pain that not only wanted to get off disability and pain pills, but actually did so. So just know there's a lot of mass consciousness pulling you back, right? Is it crabs that pull each other back when one's trying to escape the boiling water? I think it's crabs. Correct me if I'm off. The world is like that. Your friends, your family, you're trying to crawl out of the boiling water for a better life and they grab you and drag you back in. So do what you have to do, right? And yes, that means learn stuff, join a trade school, get a job. That's part of it. But also do personal development as much as you can, giving your budget of time and money. If you only got an hour a week, do an hour a week. No worries. Let's see, other questions. Okay, if they change the game on me, does that put me back in the victim stage? It can. That we all carry residue of the lower vibrations, such as the victim. And when you get hit with a challenge, a setback, it's normal to regress to past behaviors. What you'll find is it just doesn't work like it used to. I found that with alcohol. When I was young, if I was stressed out, I could do a couple shots of whiskey. I've never had a big problem with alcohol because my father was an alcoholic. I'm too scared of that. But it would be nice and relaxing. At the age I am now, which is a lot older than I was back then, when I drink hard alcohol, it kind of, it makes my stomach burn a little bit. It gives me heartburn. It gives me a headache. So it's nothing inherently bad about it. It's just my body and mind are in a different place and it works differently. So you're going to go back to the victim expecting it to work, but it won't. So just know that's normal. And it is a difficult one. The victor vehicle is the hardest because there's very little support for it. Very few people on this planet would understand what you're even talking about, let alone know how to support you. And, I think I figured it out. I don't have all the answers, but I got a couple of them, right? And I'm here to share. So, yeah, and you may have to do some clearing of the old residue, right? Digging, movement, lots of things you can do, and learning how to embrace the vehicle. It's a new set of rules. And it's really frustrating until you figure it out. Okay, it is crabs, awesome. But yeah, most of us are like crabs in a bucket. Someone tries to crawl out, the others pull them right back. Other questions or shares, go for it. If not, we're at 1:59, so this would be a great place to wrap up. And what I'm planning on doing is we'll finish the formal session, stop the recording. And if anybody has suggestions about topics or wants to volunteer to lead, we'll talk for a few minutes. I'll stick around. All right, cool. So congratulations. This is the first time I've talked much about my theory in a group. I mentioned it a little bit in some one-on-ones, maybe AI sessions, but this is my first attempt kind of putting it out there for the world. I think it's cool stuff. All right, awesome. We will wrap up for today. So everyone watching this on YouTube, make sure you click like, click subscribe, tell all your friends. And we're planning on doing this, maybe not every week, but the goal is to do at least 2, maybe 3 sessions a month. And for right now, we'll stick with Mondays for now. But one of the things we'll talk about after we shut off is I just want to get some feedback. When do you guys think would be a good time to have these groups? And we'll go from there. Awesome. Good to see everyone. Until next time, please take care and namaste. All right, so recording off. Goodbye, good night, good morning, depending on where you live.